What if the thing you trust most, your own feelings, has quietly become the most powerful weapon used against you? We live in a world that tells you to feel everything, that your emotions are sacred, that vulnerability is strength, that expressing how you feel is the same as knowing who you are. At first, it sounds like progress. After all, generations before us were emotionally locked down, taught to suppress, to endure, to stay silent. Now we are encouraged to open up, to share our trauma, to live out loud. Every scroll through social media reveals someone crying, someone confessing, someone raging, someone healing. Everything is visible. Nothing is filtered. And it's celebrated, but something doesn't feel right. If emotional expression has truly liberated us, why does society feel more fragile, more anxious, and more divided than ever before? If we are encouraged to be vulnerable, why does it so often feel like we're being watched, judged, and manipulated? The moment we do? If we are feeling everything, are we feeling clearly, or are we being led? There is a darker possibility, one that hides in plain sight. What if emotional expression has become less about truth and more about control? This shift didn't happen overnight. In ancient philosophy, emotions were seen as wild currents of the soul, powerful but dangerous. The Stoics believed that true strength meant mastering your emotions, not obeying them. To feel was natural, but to be ruled by feeling was weakness. Emotions were guides, not gods. Now, that idea feels almost offensive. We don't master emotions anymore, we display them. We are not encouraged to regulate our feelings, we are encouraged to perform them. Pain becomes content. Rage becomes identity. And sorrow becomes social currency. You are told to be authentic, but authenticity itself has become a market. In a world where attention is everything, emotional expression isn't just a release, it's a strategy. The louder your feelings, the more likes, shares, and validation you receive. And the more emotional you are, the more visible, and thus, the more powerful you seem. But visibility is not the same as truth. And emotional expression is not the same as emotional clarity. What began as vulnerability has turned into performance, a ritual, a social costume. And behind that costume, something subtle and disturbing begins to emerge. Once you are trained to think with your feelings, you become easy to manipulate. Because emotions, unlike reason, don't ask for evidence. They don't verify. They respond immediately, instinctively, viscerally, and that's what makes them powerful. That's what makes them profitable. And that's what makes them dangerous in the wrong hands. If your emotions can be predicted, they can be provoked. If they can be provoked, they can be used. Your anger, your guilt, your empathy, your fear, they can all be harvested, marketed, redirected. REAPONIZED. You were promised emotional freedom. But what you received was emotional programming. Now, your sadness sells products. Your outrage fuels movements you barely understand. Your empathy is played like a piano, each key struck by someone who knows exactly how to make you react. You become a character in someone else's play, crying on cue, cheering on command, never realizing the script isn't yours. And what's most sinister is this: the strings that move you are invisible. You believe you're acting freely, but in reality, you're just responding to images, headlines, hashtags, trends, fears. The performance feels natural. But it's not. It's conditioned. Tyranny doesn't always wear boots. Sometimes it wears a smile. Sometimes it looks like therapy speak. Sometimes it feels like self-care. And sometimes it sounds like the soft, soothing voice telling you that your emotions are everything, so long as they're the right ones. This is the new obedience. Not imposed by force, but by feeling. Not through fear, but through affirmation. You follow the path that feels good. You avoid what feels wrong. But what if those feelings were never truly yours? This is the smile that hides the knife. You were told to feel everything. No one told you those feelings could be used against you. No one warned you that the thing most personal to you could become the very tool of your control. And now, what we call emotional liberation may be something far more dangerous, not freedom, but a beautiful kind of submission. Empathy was once sacred. The invisible thread that held human beings together, a bridge across pain, across culture, across time. It was the ability to feel what another feels without becoming them, to recognize suffering without needing to absorb it. It was noble, human, and rare. But something changed. Today, empathy is everywhere. Or so it seems. Social platforms overflow with compassion, with outrage, with messages of solidarity, healing, and justice. We wear empathy like a badge. But beneath the surface, something more disturbing is happening. Empathy is no longer just felt. It is performed. No longer private. It is weaponized. This shift didn't come from nowhere. Friedrich Nietzsche warned of it long before it had a name. In his critique of herd morality, Nietzsche argued that when morality is no longer rooted in strength or principle, but in collective emotion, it becomes dangerous. The crowd, he said, is not moral. The crowd is obedient. And empathy, in the hands of a crowd, becomes a kind of moral anesthesia, numbing reason, amplifying outrage, demanding conformity. Empathy, untethered from clarity, becomes the engine of the mob. You don't have to go far to see it. Watch how quickly collective feeling spreads online. One person shares a tragedy. Another shares their tears. Soon a million voices echo the pain. But not always out of understanding. Sometimes out of obligation. Out of fear. Out of pressure to join the emotional tide. And here lies the trap. When empathy becomes viral, it becomes hollow. No longer rooted in connection, but in mimicry. Girard called this mimetic desire, the idea that human emotions are contagious. We want what others want. We feel what others feel. Not because we understand it, but because we're wired to mirror. But when millions mirror emotion without questioning it, empathy becomes ideology. It no longer asks, what happened? It demands, whose side are you on? Empathy, once the most human of instincts, has been co-opted as a tool for tribal enforcement. It has been transformed into a political litmus test, an emotional loyalty oath, a mask that hides the absence of critical thought. You are told, if you don't feel what we feel, you're heartless. If you don't post, you don't care. If you ask questions, you're complicit. Silence becomes violence. Nuance becomes betrayal. Emotion becomes law. And empathy, the thing meant to connect us, becomes a weapon that divides. History has seen this before. The French Revolution began with noble ideals, liberty, equality, fraternity. The voices of the oppressed rose against the elite. The people united in feeling, in righteous anger, in shared humanity. But soon, empathy curdled into vengeance. The emotional high of collective justice transformed into the frenzy of mob violence. One by one, heads rolled. Not because the ideals were wrong, but because emotion, once unleashed and unexamined, obeys no limit. It becomes its own god. This is the danger of empathy untethered from wisdom. The human capacity to feel becomes the system's most efficient tool of control, not by suppressing empathy, but by flooding it, by making you feel everything, all the time, for everyone, until you are exhausted, confused, and compliant, until you echo what you're told, until you become a channel for signals you don't remember choosing, and you don't even realize it's happening. Because it feels right, that's what makes it so effective. No one questions empathy. No one fears it. But when it becomes a mechanism of emotional obedience, its danger is more profound than hate because it wears the face of compassion. This is the real psychological warfare of our time. What if your empathy isn't yours anymore? What if it has been scripted, rehearsed, and fed back to you in perfectly designed doses, just enough to keep you engaged, outraged, and aligned? With the proper emotional current, we imagine weapons as loud, forceful, and visible. But some of the most powerful weapons in history have been silent. And some of the most effective control mechanisms look like care. In this world, the echo chamber isn't just informational. It's emotional. You cry because others cry. You fear because others fear. You follow because everyone else is feeling the same thing at the same time, and to not feel it would make you inhuman. But if you no longer know where your feelings end and someone else's begin, then who, exactly, are you obeying? Not a tyrant, not a state, not a god, but a wave, a mood, a ritual. You were promised a connection, but what you were given was a script, and the more you perform it, the more human you seem and the less human you become. There was a time when technology served the mind, when tools were built to extend human reason, enhance decision-making, and offer access to truth. But today, the tools have changed, and so have their goals. Algorithms no longer aim to inform you, they aim to provoke you. They are not designed to broaden your awareness. They are trained to narrow your focus, not to reflect your curiosity, but to feed your reactivity. You open your phone and something happens. Not by chance, not by coincidence, but by prediction. A story appears, a headline, a video, a tragedy, a joke, a face you love, a fear you hate. You think you're just scrolling, but what's really happening is far more precise. You are being shaped. Every swipe is measured. Every pause is noted. Every flicker of attention is recorded and fed into a machine that doesn't understand truth, only patterns. A machine that doesn't care who you are, only what you'll do next. And what you'll feel along the way. Emotion has become data. Anger has become a metric, tears, a trigger. Your nervous system, an interface. This is not the internet of knowledge. It is the internet of mood. And in this ecosystem, the calm mind disappears because it doesn't convert. A calm mind doesn't comment. A calm mind doesn't share. A calm mind doesn't consume endlessly at 2 a.m. The digital machine thrives on the irrational. It feeds on the emotional. And it learns, faster than you can imagine, exactly what will set you off, draw you in, or make you feel just vulnerable enough to keep scrolling. This is no accident. It is the business model. In this system, your attention is the currency, but your emotions are the product. Michel Foucault once described a form of power that no longer punishes, no longer commands, but instead designs the environment of behavior. Invisible power, not enforced, but embedded. That is exactly what we see now. Power does not arrive as propaganda. It arrives as personalization. It doesn't threaten you. It studies you. It doesn't forbid. It nudges. It doesn't need to control your choices because it controls the conditions under which you choose. This is not a dystopian future. It is the invisible present. From TikTok tears to Twitter rage, you are part of an emotional ecosystem engineered to provoke, to seduce, and to addict. And the more reactive you are, the more predictable you become. And the more predictable you become, the more programmable you are. The irony is brutal. You feel more expressive than ever, but your feelings are being farmed. You feel more connected than ever, but you're alone, locked in a feedback loop tailored just for you. This is the new mirror, a machine that reflects your mood, then silently turns it into a cage. Because if a machine can predict your next Feeling, are you still choosing it? We tell ourselves we are free, that we follow what resonates, that we click what matters to us, but the system doesn't ask what matters. It asks what keeps you hooked, what outrages you, what bypasses thought, and hits straight at your most immediate, emotional reflex. And it does this not for truth or justice or clarity, but for profit, for metrics, for engagement. It is not personal. It is systemic. It is not evil. It is efficient, but the effect is the same. A society of people who feel constantly and think rarely. This is not just manipulation. It is optimization. Not for your well-being, but for your impulsivity. And the cost? Subtle, but profound. The loss of discernment. The erosion of attention. The slow, quiet death of sovereignty. Because if your emotional state can be engineered by an algorithm, then your freedom becomes an illusion. For centuries, Western civilization held on to a fragile hope that man, by reason alone, could rise above instinct. That logic could tame the chaos of impulse. That truth, pursued with discipline, could protect us from madness. This was the Enlightenment dream, the age of the thinker, the birth of the rational self, the autonomous mind capable of truth without tradition, wisdom without superstition, and morality without manipulation. But look around now. That dream is collapsing. We live in the ruins of rational man, and something else, something far more volatile, has taken his place. We no longer value clarity. We value reaction. We no longer reward thought. We reward emotion. We no longer ask, is it true? We ask, does it offend? In place of the sovereign thinker stands the emotionally reactive consumer, a person who doesn't deliberate but responds. Not based on truth, but on feeling. Not guided by reason, but by sensation, offense, trauma, identity, and tribal belonging. This shift did not happen by chance. It is the natural endpoint of a society that has confused emotional intensity with moral depth. The philosopher Alasdair MacIntyre called it emotivism, the idea that moral language no longer refers to objective values but simply to emotional expressions. To say something is wrong no longer means it violates truth or principle. It just means, I don't like it. It offends me. It hurts someone's feelings. And so, the moral debate becomes a contest of sensitivities. Whoever feels more or claims more harm wins the argument not through reason, but through emotional leverage. It's a rigged game. And reason doesn't even get to play. Compare the ancient philosopher Socrates, calm, methodical, always questioning, with the modern social commentator who must tread carefully around every word, every tone, every interpretation, lest they be branded insensitive, problematic, or worse. Socrates was put to death for corrupting the youth. Today, he would be canceled for making them uncomfortable, and that should terrify us. Because once emotional offense replaces reasoned argument, dialogue dies. And where dialogue dies, truth goes with it. This isn't just about politics or culture. It's about cognition. The neuroscientist Antonio Damasio showed that emotion plays a vital role in decision-making. We don't think despite our feelings. We think with them, but the key is integration. When emotion guides attention, but reason steers behavior, we thrive. But when emotion overwhelms reason, we collapse. And that's where we are now. We are no longer integrating emotion. We are obeying it. We are not feeling to understand, we are feeling to react. And the louder the feeling, the more moral authority it appears to carry. This is the new algorithm of legitimacy. Feel more. Express more. Demand more. Think less. But this isn't progress. It's regression. a return to pre-rational tribalism where the loudest feeling defines the collective truth, and silence is seen as betrayal, and it has consequences. In classrooms, uncomfortable ideas are removed to protect feelings. In discourse, dissent is punished not with debate, but with shame. In politics, policy is shaped not by long-term logic, but by short-term outrage. And in personal life, discomfort is seen, not as a necessary friction for growth, but as a form of violence to be eliminated. The result? A culture that walks on eggshells but never questions its path. A society where truth bends to mood and mood is manufactured by machines. The rational man is not just forgotten. He is feared because reason disrupts the script. It pauses the performance. It threatens the emotional consensus with the dangerous possibility of truth. And in a world addicted to emotional immediacy, truth becomes unbearable. What we are witnessing is not just a cultural shift. It is a cognitive reprogramming, a rewiring of the mind away from discipline toward indulgence, away from the difficult process of thinking toward the easier seduction of feeling. This is not a glitch. It is a new design. And if it continues, the cost will not be merely intellectual. It will be existential, because once we lose the capacity to think clearly, to argue without fear, to speak without panic, to reason through conflict, we lose something deeper than freedom. We lose the ability to know who we are. We become not people of thought, but fragments of mood. Not individuals, but emotional clusters. Not citizens of reason, but prisoners of sensation. The statue of reason still stands in our cultural mythology. But look closer. It's cracked, crumbling, and from its fractures, vines of emotion grow, beautiful, wild, and unstoppable. We are not just distracted. We are being reprogrammed. Not to feel more, but to think less. And the fall of rational man may not lead to a new kind of freedom, but to a new kind of obedience. There was once a time when identity meant depth. It meant memory, character, an unfolding self shaped by experience, reflection, and contradiction. Who you were wasn't something you posted. It was something you lived and often didn't understand fully, even yourself. But that idea has decayed. Today, identity is no longer about depth. It's about visibility, not who you are, but what you feel. And more importantly, how you express it. We have entered the age of emotional branding. You are no longer simply living your emotions. You are presenting them, editing them, curating them, broadcasting them to the world in real time, hoping for feedback, validation, or a place to belong. Carl Jung warned us about this long before social media, long before viral trends, long before hashtags. He called it the shadow, the parts of ourselves we refuse to see, buried under the masks we wear. And in today's world, those masks have multiplied. They are not just personal. They are performative. They are monetized. They are identities. We are told to be ourselves, but what we really mean is perform yourself, post your pain, flaunt your trauma, declare your truth, be the main character, be the brand, be your feelings, or be no one at all. We used to ask, who am I really? Now we ask, how do I appear? And that subtle shift has changed everything. You are rewarded for performance, not process. For expression, not introspection. For dramatizing your inner life, not understanding it. The louder you feel, the more real you seem. The more reactive you are, the more authentic you appear. And slowly, without noticing, you begin to believe the performance is the person. This is the false mirror, a reflection not of who you are, but of how others respond to what you show. And if enough people reflect it back, you start to believe it. This must be me. This rage, this pain, this posture. This is my identity. But it's not. It's just a loop of reaction and reward, of identity through emotion, of selfhood reduced to a highlight reel of moods. Scroll through the timelines. You'll see it. People building entire personas around hurt, around healing, around rage, around redemption, but all of it public, all of it stylized, all of it flattened into digestible archetypes. A personal mythology made for others to consume. The self becomes content, and what is lost in this transformation is something irreplaceable. The private journey of becoming, not the version you present, but the one you uncover. Not the identity you declare, but the one you wrestle with silently, painfully, honestly. The self beneath the performance. The self no one applauds. But that self is harder to sell. It's harder to post. Harder to brand. So we abandon it in favor of something easier, shinier, more legible. And slowly we forget there was ever a difference. This is the quiet horror of the modern self. You begin by showing a version of you, then you refine it, then you exaggerate it, then you need it, then you are it, but deep down, something doesn't fit. There's a voice in the quiet, a feeling in the stillness, that you've mistaken your shadow for your soul, because feelings are real, but they are not you. They are weather systems passing through the landscape of the self. To mistake them for your identity is to live in a storm and call it home. The tragedy of fear. The false mirror is not that it lies. It's that it tells just enough truth to keep you from looking deeper. And the longer you stare into it, the more you forget what you were trying to find. You don't just express your feelings. You become the performance. And in that performance, the real self, the one no one sees, quietly disappears. What if the most powerful form of control is the one that doesn't look like control at all? Not laws, not surveillance, not fear, but you regulating yourself, not because someone told you to, but because you've internalized the emotional code of obedience so deeply, it feels like virtue. This is the final evolution of emotional weaponry. You don't need to be silenced. If you've trained yourself to speak only what is safe, you don't need to be policed. If you've learned to feel only what is permitted, and you don't need to be watched. If you've become your own warden. It begins subtly. You share something online, a story, a thought, a question. Then you pause. You consider the reaction. Will people misunderstand? Will it offend? Will it sound too aggressive, too passive, too privileged, too emotional, not emotional enough? You tweak your tone. You dilute your truth. You decorate your message and disclaimers. And over time, you begin to pre-edit your feelings before you even feel them. This isn't just caution. It's performance. A performance of emotional acceptability constantly running in the background. The philosopher Slavoj Žižek once said, "Ideology is not what you consciously believe. It's what you do without thinking. It's what you've absorbed so completely. It feels like common sense. It becomes a reflex, and so we reach a society where emotional reflex becomes a moral code. We're feeling the right thing at the right volume, with the right hashtags, for the right people becomes your ticket to belonging. But belonging has a price. The price is silence, not the silence of censorship, but the silence of consent, because when you've learned to obey emotionally, when you've been rewarded for showing the correct feelings and punished for deviating, you don't need oppression. You need applause, and that applause is everywhere. You see it when someone publicly shamans themselves to prove their morality. You see it when people cry on cue in perfectly lit videos, confessing not truth, but conformity. You see it when someone dares to question, then immediately apologizes, Not because they were wrong, but because they weren't allowed to be unclear. We are not being controlled. We are being celebrated for controlling ourselves. Eric Fromm called this the fear of freedom, the terrifying weight of responsibility that comes with true autonomy. It's easier, he said, to conform, to surrender, to trade the burden of independent thought for the safety of group feeling. So we comply, not by force, but by habit. We regulate, not to survive, but to be liked. We obey, not to avoid punishment, but to feel virtuous. And here lies the final illusion. You think you are free because no one is stopping you. But in truth, no one needs to. You've already learned to stop yourself. This is obedience by other means. A smile, a gesture, a hashtag, a curated emotion performed in a room full of applause. And behind that applause is the silence of everything that was never said. Not all prisons have walls. Some are built out of comfort. Not all obedience looks like fear. Some look like joy. We live in an era obsessed with feeling good, affirmations, positivity, gratitude, self-care, wellness apps that whisper serenity, therapists in your pocket, soft lights, gentle voices, emotional safe spaces. It seems enlightened, evolved, humane. But what if it's not? What if it's sedation? Because underneath the glow of emotional wellness is a quieter, darker logic. That discomfort is failure. That sadness is dysfunction. That fear, anger, confusion, grief are problems to be fixed, not signals to be heard. And so we smile. We regulate, we meditate, we breathe, but not to awaken, to numb. What used to be the full spectrum of human experience has been flattened into a narrow obsession: feel good or feel broken. This is not healing. This is self-censorship, disguised as mental health. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard called it the sickness unto death. Despair, not of suffering, but of not knowing that you are in despair at all. And nothing hides that despair better than happiness. Not real joy, but curated, performative, socially acceptable happiness, the kind that fits on a screen, wears nice colors, and doesn't disrupt the group mood. It's a false serenity, a calmness that demands nothing be questioned, a peace that punishes depth. And that's where the danger lies. Because a mind obsessed with feeling good is a mind easily controlled. It avoids confrontation. It rejects tension. It fears truth. Because truth might disturb the emotional equilibrium. Is it any surprise that the most compliant minds today are also the most comforted? We are training ourselves to collapse, not from stress, but from softness. We are building a culture that avoids anything that scratches the surface. And in doing so, we create people who cannot endure friction, moral, intellectual, emotional. This is not evolution. It is sedation. We've made emotional safety into a sacred virtue. But maybe it's something else. Maybe it's the final obedience, to feel good, no matter how much truth you have to ignore. And the question that haunts this moment is simple. Have we mistaken comfort for consciousness? What if your emotions were never meant to rule you? What if they were signals, not shackles, messages, not masters? All along, this was the forgotten truth. Freedom does not mean feeling nothing. It means not being controlled by everything you feel. For thousands of years, this was the teaching of those who saw beyond the surface. The Stoics taught that emotion is real, but not final. That anger, fear, and sadness arise like weather, but the self can remain still, like the mountain beneath the storm. Buddhism taught that clinging to feeling, whether joy or sorrow, is the root of suffering. That liberation comes not from numbing life, but from seeing its impermanence with eyes wide open. And the existentialists reminded us that discomfort is not an enemy, but a gateway. That to live authentically is to face the absurd, the uncertain, the void, and still choose meaning. None of these traditions denied emotion, but none of them surrendered to it either. And that's the real betrayal of modern culture. It didn't teach you to feel. It taught you to obey your feelings, to believe that what you feel is who you are, and that to question your emotions is to betray yourself. But the opposite is true. To see through your emotions, to stand above the trigger, is not denial. It is awareness. It is sovereignty. Emotions are messengers. They point, they warn, they signal. But they are not the truth itself. They are a part of you. They are not the whole of you. And once you realize this, something shifts. You stop performing. You stop apologizing for your silence. You stop chasing applause for your pain. You stop fearing the stillness inside you. And in that stillness, for the first time, you begin to see not the algorithm's reflection, not the emotional branding, not the curated identity, but you, the one who watches, the one who decides, the one who was never just a reaction, but a being capable of reason, depth, contradiction, and peace. That is the final rebellion, not to feel less, but to feel clearly, not to escape emotion, but to walk through it untouched by its leash. And in that clarity, we reclaim something no system can weaponize, our inner freedom. Because once you stop being triggered, you start being free.